Lisa Chen had been serving as a district court judge for 15 years in the small but growing suburb of Oak Ridge. Everyone in the legal community knew Judge Chen for her razor-sharp memory, fair rulings, and the way she managed her courtroom with both efficiency and compassion. She wasn't the kind of judge who intimidated people unnecessarily, but she commanded respect through her thorough knowledge of the law and unwavering commitment to justice. Life had been going smoothly until that unfortunate tennis match 3 weeks ago. Lisa had been playing doubles with her husband Tom and another couple when she made a quick turn to return a serve and heard the dreaded pop in her knee. The orthopedic surgeon had confirmed what she already suspected, a torn ACL that required surgery and several months of recovery. 6 to 8 weeks on crutches, the doctor had told her, and then physical therapy for at least 4 months after that. Lisa had frowned at this news. She was an active person who enjoyed hiking on weekends and taking evening walks with Tom around their neighborhood. Being confined to crutches felt like a prison sentence. Still, she was determined to maintain as much normalcy as possible. "At least I can still work," she had told Tom with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Most of my job involves sitting down anyway." On this particular Sunday afternoon, Lisa was going stir-crazy after being cooped up in the house all week. The spring weather was perfect and 72 degrees with a light breeze and puffy white clouds dotting the blue sky. Birds were chirping, flowers were blooming, and Lisa couldn't bear to spend another minute indoors. "Tom," she called out to her husband who was reading the newspaper in their sunroom, "can we go to the park? Just for a little while? I need to breathe some fresh air before I lose my mind." Tom looked up from his paper with concern etched on his face. "Are you sure you're up for it?" The doctor said to take it easy. "I'm not planning to run a marathon," Lisa replied with a laugh. "Just a slow walk around the pond. The paths are paved and wide. It should be perfect for these." She tapped her crutches against the hardwood floor for emphasis. Tom couldn't argue with that logic or the hopeful look in his wife's eyes. 20 minutes later, he was carefully helping Lisa out of their blue sedan in the parking lot of Pine Ridge Community Park. The park was a point of pride for their homeowners association, a beautifully maintained green space with flowering trees, a small lake with a fountain in the center, and pristine walking paths that wound through carefully landscaped gardens. "Take it slow," Tom cautioned as Lisa positioned her crutches and began to make her way toward the park entrance. She moved awkwardly but was starting to get the hang of the rhythm required for crutch walking. Left crutch forward, right crutch, forward, swing body through, repeat. It wasn't graceful, but it was working. They had almost reached the main path when a woman stepped directly into their path, blocking their way. She wore khaki pants and a navy blue polo shirt with Pine Ridge HOA embroidered in gold thread over the pocket. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she wore large sunglasses despite the fact that she was standing in the shade. A gold name badge pinned to her shirt identified her as Patricia Wilson, HOA President. Tom smiled politely. "Good afternoon." Patricia didn't return the smile. Instead, she pointed to Lisa's crutches with a manicured finger. "I'm sorry, but those aren't allowed on the walking paths." Lisa blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" "The crutches," Patricia clarified, as if speaking to someone who was hard of hearing rather than perfectly capable of understanding. "They're not allowed on our paths. The metal tips can damage the special pavement." Tom stepped forward slightly. "Actually, they have rubber tips specifically designed not to mark surfaces." He pointed to the black rubber caps on the ends of Lisa's crutches. "They won't cause any damage." Patricia's lips thinned into a tight line. "It's not just about marking. It's about indentation damage. These paths cost the HOA thousands of dollars to install and maintain. The concentrated pressure from crutches can create divots in the surface." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. Standing in one position was more tiring than actually moving with the crutches. "I understand you're concerned about maintaining the park, but I assure you my crutches won't damage anything. I'll be very careful." "Rules are rules," Patricia said with a shrug that suggested this was simply out of her hands. "The HOA handbook clearly states that no pointed objects, including but not limited to golf shoes, cleats, high heels, ski poles, and yes, crutches, are permitted on the walking paths. Lisa felt her face grow warm with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. There were other people in the park watching this interaction now. An elderly couple had slowed their walk to observe, and a man with a golden retriever had stopped, completely, his dog sitting patiently at his feet. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, his voice taking on an edge. "My wife has a temporary disability and deserves to enjoy the park just like anyone else. We've lived in this community and paid our HOA dues for 8 years." Patricia seemed unmoved. "There's a public park just 2 miles down the road. They don't have our standards, but they can accommodate your situation." She gestured vaguely toward Lisa's knee brace. Lisa felt a surge of indignation. She opened her mouth to identify herself as Judge Chen, to explain that what Patricia was doing likely violated several accessibility laws. But before she could speak, Patricia did something unthinkable. Perhaps she meant to merely gesture toward the exit, or perhaps she truly intended to physically remove them from the path. Whatever her intention, the result was that her hand connected with one of Lisa's crutches, knocking it sideways. The sudden loss of support caused Lisa to stumble. If not for Tom's quick reflexes in catching her arm, she might have fallen and further injured her knee. The pain that shot through her leg as she struggled to regain her balance brought tears to her eyes. "Hey!" Tom shouted, his face flushed with anger. "What's wrong with you?" A small crowd had gathered now, murmuring disapprovingly at Patricia's actions. The man with the golden retriever had stepped forward, looking ready to intervene if necessary. Patricia seemed briefly taken aback by what she had done, but quickly recovered her composure. "I'm sorry if you lost your balance, but I was simply pointing toward the exit. Now, I must insist that you leave the path immediately." Lisa, having regained her stability, placed a calming hand on Tom's arm. Despite the pain and humiliation, her face took on the same expression she wore in her courtroom when faced with particularly difficult attorneys. Calm, collected, and observant. "What's your full name?" she asked Patricia quietly. Patricia straightened her shoulders, clearly interpreting this as a challenge rather than a threat. "Patricia Wilson, Pine Ridge HOA president. And before you ask, yes, you can file a complaint, but I'm simply enforcing our regulations." Lisa nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Tom, would you mind taking me home now? I think I've had enough fresh air for today." Tom looked at his wife in surprise. He had expected her to put this woman in her place with the same authority she brought to her courtroom. Instead, Lisa was disengaging completely. As Tom helped Lisa back to the car, she remained unusually quiet. It wasn't until they were driving away from the park that she finally spoke. "Interesting timing," she said, looking out the window thoughtfully. "What do you mean?" Tom asked, still seething about the encounter. Lisa turned to him with the hint of a smile. "Nothing really. Just that sometimes the universe has a peculiar sense of humor." Little did Patricia Wilson know that her actions that day would set in motion a chain of events that would change the Pine Ridge community forever. 2 weeks had passed since the park incident. Lisa's knee was healing slowly, and she had graduated from using 2 crutches to just 1. The surgery had gone well, but the recovery was tedious. Each morning, she dutifully performed the exercises her physical therapist had prescribed, gritting her teeth through the discomfort. Progress isn't always comfortable, she would remind herself. Despite her injury, Lisa had returned to work after just 3 days at home. Her fellow judges had been understanding, rearranging the court schedule so she could preside over cases in the courtroom closest to the elevator. Her law clerk, Jenny, had taken to carrying her files and bringing her lunch so Lisa wouldn't have to navigate the courthouse cafeteria on crutches. Monday morning arrived with a steady rainfall that matched Lisa's mood. The weekend had been frustrating. She'd wanted to work in her garden, but Tom had firmly vetoed that idea. Doctor's orders. He'd reminded her each time she'd gazed longingly at her neglected flower beds. The rain streaking down her office window somehow made her feel less alone in her gloominess. "Judge Chen?" Jenny knocked softly before entering Lisa's chambers, her arms laden with a stack of folders. "The new case assignments came in. Do you want to review them now or after your 10 o'clock hearing?" Lisa checked her watch. She had 45 minutes before she needed to be in the courtroom. Now is fine. Let's see what we've got. Jenny placed the stack on Lisa's desk and lingered as the judge began flipping through the files. Most were routine, a few contract disputes, a personal injury claim, and a property boundary disagreement. Nothing out of the ordinary until she reached the last folder. Pine Ridge Homeowners Association versus City of Oak Ridge, Lisa read aloud, her eyebrows rising slightly. She opened the file and began scanning the complaint. The lawsuit outlined the HOA's objection to new city ordinances that required all community spaces to comply with updated accessibility standards. The complaint argued that the mandated modifications, which included installing ramps, widening certain pathways, and adding handrails, would negatively impact the aesthetic value and exclusivity of the neighborhood and place undue financial burden on the homeowners. Lisa flipped to the signature page and felt a jolt of recognition. There it was in black and white. Patricia Wilson, President, Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. Jenny noticed Lisa's expression change. Something interesting? Lisa read a bit further, her pulse quickening. The lawsuit specifically mentioned the park pathways, arguing that they had been designed with specific materials that would be compromised by the proposed modifications, and that the current restrictions on pointed objects such as crutches and canes are reasonable accommodations that preserve the integrity of our community investments. She looked up at Jenny, who was waiting curiously. Do I know anyone involved in this case? Yes, you could say that. Lisa hesitated, then made her decision. I need to recuse myself from this one. Jenny's eyes widened in surprise. In her 3 years working for Judge Chen, she had never seen her recuse herself from a case. May I ask why? Lisa tapped the file with her finger. I had let's call it an encounter with the plaintiff 2 weeks ago, at the Pine Ridge Park. It would be inappropriate for me to preside over this case. What kind of encounter? Jenny asked, curiosity evident in her voice. Lisa smiled thinly. The kind that proves this lawsuit is about exactly what it appears to be about, keeping certain people out of their precious park. She handed the file back to Jenny. Please prepare the recusal paperwork. This needs to go to another judge, and I'd suggest Judge Rivera. He specializes in ADA compliance cases. As Jenny turned to leave, Lisa added, And Jenny, not a word about this to anyone, please. The legal community in this city is small enough without adding gossip to the mix. After Jenny left, Lisa swiveled her chair to face the rain-streaked window. She thought back to Patricia Wilson's face at the park. The self-importance, the disdain, the complete lack of empathy. Now here she was, spearheading a lawsuit to fight against accessibility requirements. The irony wasn't lost on Lisa. She picked up her phone and called Tom. You're never going to believe what just landed on my desk, she said when he answered. Try me, Tom replied, the smile evident in his voice. Lisa explained about the lawsuit, keeping her voice low despite her private office. The universe really does have a strange sense of humor. If I hadn't recused myself, I would have been the judge deciding whether their precious pathways need to be made accessible to people like, well, me. That's incredible, Tom said. I wish you could have seen her face when she realized who you are. That's not how justice works, Lisa replied, though the thought had admittedly crossed her mind. The case needs to be decided on its merits, not influenced by personal grudges. Always the honorable judge, Tom said fondly, even when no one would blame you for wanting a little payback. After hanging up, Lisa sat thinking about the situation. As a judge, she had seen countless cases where people revealed their true characters through legal action. This lawsuit was particularly revealing, a community fighting for the right to exclude those who didn't fit their narrow definition of desirable. People like her, temporarily using crutches, or like Mr. Patel, down the street, who used a walker, or Mrs. Johnson's daughter who visited in her wheelchair every Sunday. That evening, as Tom drove them home through the rain, they passed the Pine Ridge Park. The entrance was visible from the road, pristine and empty in the downpour. "Do you regret recusing yourself?" Tom asked, noticing Lisa's gaze lingering on the park. Lisa considered the question carefully. "No, it was the right thing to do, but I am curious to see how Judge Rivera handles the case." Judge Antonio Rivera was known for his no-nonsense approach to discrimination cases. He had lost his leg in a motorcycle accident during law school and had little patience for arguments against reasonable accommodations. Lisa couldn't help but smile at the thought of Patricia Wilson standing before him, arguing that crutches would damage her precious pathways. "What's that smile for?" Tom asked. "Nothing," Lisa said innocently. "Just thinking about how things have a way of working themselves out." That night, as she lay awake listening to the rain, Lisa thought about ethics and justice. She had done the right thing by recusing herself. Any personal involvement would have tainted the proceedings. But there was something satisfying about knowing that the case would still be heard, that Patricia Wilson would still have to defend her discriminatory policies in court. The next morning, Lisa received an email confirming that Judge Rivera had been assigned to the Pine Ridge HOA case. She felt a sense of closure. The wheels of justice were turning, and she had maintained her integrity in the process. "How's your knee today?" Jenny asked as she brought in the morning's files. "Better," Lisa replied with genuine optimism. "Definitely better." And it was true, not just about her knee. Something about passing the case to a qualified colleague, about knowing that justice would be served without her direct involvement. It lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The system worked when people did the right thing, even when no one was watching, especially when no one was watching. As she prepared for her first hearing of the day, Lisa felt renewed purpose in her role as a judge. Today she would ensure that everyone in her courtroom was treated with dignity and respect, because that's how justice worked best. The courthouse cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chatter. Lawyers huddled over case files, court reporters gossiped about morning proceedings, and courthouse staff enjoyed brief respites from their busy schedules. In a corner booth near the window, Lisa sat across from her colleague, Judge Olivia Rivera. Judge Antonio Rivera's wife and one of Lisa's closest friends in the legal community. "You're looking better," Olivia commented, eyeing Lisa's crutch, propped against the wall beside their table. "Down to just one now?" Lisa nodded, taking a sip of her iced tea. "Physical therapy is helping. The doctor says I might be able to switch to a cane in another 2 weeks if I keep up with the exercises." "That's great news," Olivia said, then lowered her voice. "Tony mentioned he got your Pine Ridge HOA case. He's quite intrigued by your recusal. Said it must have been something pretty significant for you to step away." Lisa poked at her salad with her fork. She hadn't shared the details of the park incident with anyone at work except Jenny. It was a personal interaction. That's all I can really say. Olivia raised an eyebrow but didn't push. After 15 years of friendship, she knew when Lisa was drawing a professional line. Instead, she changed the subject slightly. "Well, he's diving deep into this one. The HOA president, Patricia Wilson, right? She's quite a piece of work. Tony had to reprimand her twice yesterday for interrupting opposing counsel." Lisa wasn't surprised. "Is she representing herself?" "No, thank goodness. They have counsel, but she insists on sitting at the table and passing notes constantly." Olivia shook her head. "Tony says the HOA's whole argument is falling apart. Their lawyer submitted some board meeting minutes as evidence, and they're pretty damning." "How so?" Lisa asked, genuinely curious. "Apparently there's an email chain where this Wilson woman wrote, and I'm quoting Tony here, that people with mobility issues lower property values by making the neighborhood look like a hospital zone." Olivia grimaced. "There's more too. They've been systematically denying reasonable accommodation requests from residents for years. One elderly man asked permission to install a small ramp to his front door, and they denied it because it didn't match the community aesthetic." Lisa felt a knot forming in her stomach. "That's more than just unfriendly. That sounds like a pattern of discrimination." "Exactly what Tony said." Olivia took a bite of her sandwich before continuing. So, are you going to tell me what happened between you and this woman? Tony said your recusal note was appropriately vague, but he's dying to know the real story. Lisa hesitated. She trusted Olivia, and part of her wanted to share the experience. But another part, the careful judge who had built a reputation on ethical behavior, held her back. I encountered her while I was using my crutches, Lisa finally said. Let's just say she made it clear that people like me weren't welcome in their community spaces. Understanding dawned on Olivia's face. She gave you trouble about your crutches? In what way? Lisa sighed, deciding that a trusted colleague deserved the truth. She blocked my path at their community park, claimed my crutches would damage their precious walkways, and then… Lisa paused, still finding it hard to believe. She actually knocked one of my crutches aside. I nearly fell. Olivia's fork clattered onto her plate. She what? Lisa, that's assault. Did you file a police report? No, I didn't. Tom wanted to, but then this lawsuit came across my desk and it complicated things. Lisa rubbed her temple, feeling the familiar stress headache forming. If I'd filed a report and then been assigned their case, it would have looked retaliatory, like I was using my position to punish her. But you recused yourself, Olivia pointed out. So that's not an issue anymore. True, but now if I file a report, it could look like I'm trying to influence Tony's handling of the case. Olivia leaned back, considering this. I see your point. But Lisa, this woman assaulted you. That shouldn't go unaddressed just because she happens to be involved in a lawsuit. The two judges ate in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Around them, the cafeteria began to empty as people returned to afternoon sessions. What would you do? Lisa finally asked. Honestly, I'd file the report, Olivia said without hesitation. Not to press charges necessarily, but to document what happened. What if she's done this to other people? What if she does it again? A pattern of behavior like that should be on record. Lisa nodded slowly. That's what Tom said, too. Smart man, your husband, Olivia smiled. Look, I understand your concerns about the appearance of impropriety, but there's also the principle that no one is above the law, including you. By not reporting it because of who you are, you're creating a special exception. Lisa hadn't thought of it that way. She'd been so focused on avoiding any appearance of using her position improperly that she hadn't considered she might be holding herself to a different standard than she would any other victim. Later that afternoon, Lisa sat in her chambers staring at her phone. Tom had texted to ask if she needed a ride home or if she felt up to driving herself. She replied that she'd drive, then added, "Can we talk about the police report tonight?" His response came quickly. Absolutely. I think it's the right thing to do. That evening, their kitchen smelled of garlic and basil as Tom prepared his specialty pasta dish. Lisa sat at the island counter, watching him cook and enjoying the simple, domestic moment. So you're considering filing the report? Tom asked, stirring the sauce. I talked with Olivia at lunch. She made a good point. By not reporting it because of my position, I'm creating a special exception for myself. Lisa tapped her fingers on the countertop. And what if Patricia has done this to others? There should be a record. Tom nodded, tasting the sauce and adding a pinch more salt. I agree. And you don't have to press charges if you don't want to. Just having the incident documented is important. I'm worried about how it might look, Lisa admitted. The timing, with the lawsuit ongoing. You can explain the timing in the report, Tom suggested. Be transparent about why you waited. The truth is always the best approach. Lisa smiled at her husband's simple wisdom. When did you get so insightful about legal ethics? 15 years of dinner conversations with a judge will do that to a person, he replied with a wink. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the local police station before work. The desk sergeant recognized her immediately. She'd sentenced enough offenders over the years to be a familiar face to most of the force. Judge Chen, he greeted her with surprise. What brings you in today? I need to file a report about an incident, she said, keeping her voice low despite the nearly empty lobby. The process was straightforward. Lisa explained what had happened at the park, being careful to mention that she was only filing the report to document the incident, not to press charges. She also explained her delay in reporting, citing her ethical concerns about the timing with the lawsuit. "So you want this on record, but no further action?" the officer clarified as he typed up the report. "Correct," Lisa confirmed. "If Ms. Wilson has other incidents reported, that might change, but for now this is just documentation." As she signed the completed report, Lisa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had found the balance, doing what any citizen should do when wronged, while still maintaining her professional ethics. On her drive to the courthouse, Lisa thought about justice. Not the kind that happened in her courtroom, but the everyday kind that required people to stand up for what was right. Even when it was complicated, sometimes the right thing wasn't obvious or easy, but that didn't make it any less necessary. She smiled as she pulled into her parking space. The sun was shining, her knee felt stronger today, and she had followed both her conscience and her ethics. Whatever happened with Patricia Wilson and the Pine Ridge HOA lawsuit was now in Judge Rivera's capable hands, and Lisa had done her part just as any citizen should. 3 weeks into the Pine Ridge HOA lawsuit, the case had become the talk of the courthouse. Judge Antonio Rivera's courtroom was packed each day with spectators, a mix of Pine Ridge residents, disability rights advocates, and law students eager to watch the proceedings. The local newspaper had even run a front-page story about the case, highlighting the broader implications for community accessibility. Lisa had kept her distance, focusing on her own caseload and her recovery. Her physical therapy was progressing well. She'd graduated from the crutch to a sleek black cane that Tom had bought her as a promotion present. It was made of polished cherry wood with a comfortable grip that made walking almost pleasant again. "I think it makes me look distinguished," she'd joked to Jenny while tapping the cane lightly on the floor of her chambers. "Like a wise old judge from the movies," Jenny had agreed with a smile. On this particular Tuesday, Lisa was running late for lunch. Her morning hearing had gone longer than expected, a complicated child custody case that required careful consideration of each parent's testimony. By the time she reached the courthouse cafeteria, the lunch rush was in full swing. Lisa scanned the crowded room for an empty table, leaning slightly on her cane. The line for food stretched along one wall, filled with the usual mix of court employees and visitors. She was about to turn away and find lunch elsewhere when she spotted an empty seat at a table in the corner. Making her way carefully through the maze of chairs and tables, she approached the lone occupant. "Excuse me, would you mind if I shared your table? It's quite crowded today." The woman looked up from her salad and Lisa felt a jolt of recognition. Sitting there, dressed in a navy blue suit with her blonde hair now cut in a short bob, was Patricia Wilson. For a moment, Patricia simply stared, not recognizing Lisa without her crutches and in her judge's attire rather than weekend clothes. "Oh, sure," she finally said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Thank you," Lisa said politely, setting down her tray and hanging her cane on the edge of the table. As Lisa arranged her napkin and utensils, she could feel Patricia watching her. The moment of recognition was coming. She could almost see the wheels turning in the woman's mind. "Do I know you from somewhere?" Patricia finally asked, her fork suspended midway to her mouth. Lisa looked up calmly. "Yes, I believe we've met before. At Pine Ridge Park about 6 weeks ago. You were concerned that my crutches might damage the pathways." The color drained from Patricia's face as the memory clicked into place. Her eyes darted from Lisa's face to the judicial badge clipped to her blazer, then to the cane hanging from the table edge. "You're—" Patricia's voice had risen to a higher pitch. "You're a judge?" "Yes," Lisa replied simply, taking a bite of her sandwich. "Judge Lisa Chen, District Court." Patricia's eyes widened further. "Are you the one handling our case? The HOA lawsuit?" "No," Lisa said. "I recused myself immediately upon receiving the case. It would have been improper for me to preside over a matter involving someone with whom I'd had a personal altercation." Patricia set down her fork, her appetite apparently gone. She glanced around nervously as if checking who might be watching their interaction. I didn't know you were a judge when we met at the park. Would it have mattered? Lisa asked, genuinely curious. Would you have treated me differently if you'd known my profession? Patricia flushed. Of course she began, then stopped. Herself. I mean, I was just doing my job, enforcing the HOA rules. By physically knocking aside a disabled person's mobility aid? Lisa kept her voice level, not wanting to create a scene in the crowded cafeteria. That was an accident, Patricia insisted, though her eyes couldn't meet Lisa's. I was just gesturing, and my hand, accidentally. Ms. Wilson, Lisa interrupted gently. We both know what happened. And based on what I've heard about the testimony in your lawsuit, it wasn't an isolated incident of, let's call it overzealous rule enforcement. Patricia's shoulders slumped slightly. For the first time, she appeared less like the confident HOA president and more like someone realizing they'd made a series of poor choices. Judge Rivera is pretty tough, she admitted quietly. He's fair, Lisa corrected. He applies the law as written. A silence fell between them as each woman ate her lunch. Around them, the cafeteria buzzed with conversation and the clinking of dishes. A group of lawyers at the next table laughed loudly at a joke, making Patricia jump slightly. Can I ask you something? Patricia finally said, her voice softer than before. Why didn't you tell me who you were at the park? You could have put me in my place right then. Lisa considered the question carefully. My position doesn't give me special privileges as a citizen. Whether I'm a judge, a doctor, or a store clerk, I deserve the same treatment as anyone else. That's the whole point of equality under the law. She paused, watching Patricia absorb this. The question isn't how you treat judges. It's how you treat everyone. Patricia nodded slowly, seeming to truly listen for the first time. I should get back to court, she said after a moment. Judge Rivera doesn't tolerate tardiness. Neither do I, Lisa said with a small smile. As Patricia gathered her things, she hesitated. I really am sorry about what happened at the park. It was wrong of me. Thank you for saying that, Lisa replied. Patricia turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. Did you file a police report about the incident? I did, Lisa confirmed. Not to press charges, but to document what happened. I see, Patricia said, and for once she looked like she actually did see. The consequences of her actions, the effect on others, the larger picture beyond her narrow HOA concerns. Have a good afternoon, Judge Chen. You too, Miss Wilson. And good luck with your case. Whatever the outcome, I hope something positive comes from it. After Patricia left, Lisa sat for a moment, reflecting on their interaction. It had been surprisingly civil, even meaningful in a way she hadn't expected. There had been no dramatic confrontation, no movie-worthy moment where justice was served with a cutting remark. Just two people talking honestly about their actions and their impact. Lisa finished her lunch and gathered her things. As she stood up, balancing carefully with her cane, she noticed a group of law students watching her from across the room. One of them, a young woman with thick glasses, whispered something to her companions while glancing in Lisa's direction. Lisa smiled to herself. No doubt they'd witnessed her conversation with Patricia and were now speculating about the connection to the famous Pine Ridge case. The courthouse grapevine would be buzzing by tomorrow. On her way back to her chambers, Lisa ran into Olivia, in the elevator. I just heard the most interesting thing, Olivia said, eyes sparkling with gossip. Apparently you had lunch with the Pine Ridge HOA president. The same woman who knocked your crutch away? Lisa laughed. News travels fast around here. Yes, we shared a table in the crowded cafeteria. It was educational for both of us, I think. Did she recognize you? Eventually, Lisa said. She seemed genuinely remorseful, which surprised me. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Think it will affect how she behaves in Tony's courtroom? That's not why I spoke with her, Lisa replied. But if it makes her think twice about how she treats people with disabilities in the future, I'd consider that a positive outcome. The elevator doors opened, and Lisa stepped out onto her floor. Lisa, Olivia called after her. You're a better person than most. I don't think I could have been so civil. Lisa smiled and shrugged. It's not about being better. It's about breaking the cycle. Someone has to. As she walked back to her chambers, Lisa felt oddly at peace. The conversation with Patricia hadn't erased what happened, but it had created a moment of understanding, a small bridge across a divide that too often seemed uncrossable, and sometimes that was how real change began. The verdict came down on a crisp autumn morning 3 months after the case began. Judge Antonio Rivera ruled decisively against the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association. His 30-page decision left no room for appeal. The HOA was ordered to comply with all accessibility requirements, including widening pathways, installing ramps at all community buildings, and removing any rules that discriminated against people with mobility aids. Furthermore, the judge instituted quarterly compliance reviews for the next 5 years. The Pine Ridge HOA would need to submit detailed reports showing their progress on accessibility improvements and documenting how they were addressing residents' accommodation requests. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when the verdict was announced. Lisa watched the evening news coverage from her living room, curled up on the couch with Tom and a bowl of popcorn. Judge Rivera's ruling sends a clear message that community spaces must be accessible to all residents, the reporter was saying, standing in front of the Pine Ridge Park entrance. Sources inside the Homeowners Association tell us that an emergency board meeting has been called for tomorrow evening to discuss leadership changes. Tom reached for the remote and turned down the volume. Leadership changes, he repeated, with a satisfied smile. I wonder if Patricia Wilson is updating her resume. Be nice, Lisa chided, though she couldn't help but smile too. People can learn from their mistakes. Some people, Tom conceded. Speaking of which, how's the knee? Today? Lisa stretched her leg experimentally. Much better. Dr. Patel says I should be able to lose the cane completely in another month if the progress continues. Just in time for your birthday hike, Tom said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. Rivera Canyon like we planned before. The injury? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Lisa laughed. Maybe something a little less challenging for the first hike back. The next few weeks brought significant changes to Pine Ridge. As predicted, Patricia Wilson resigned as HOA president amid calls for her removal. The local paper ran a small article about it, noting that several residents had come forward with stories of similar treatment after learning about Lisa's experience. What surprised everyone, however, was who replaced her. Frank Delgado, a longtime resident who used a wheelchair, was elected by an overwhelming majority. Frank had been advocating for better accessibility in the community for years, often finding his requests ignored or denied by the previous leadership. Life moved on. Lisa's knee continued to heal and she gradually returned to her normal activities. Work kept her busy. A high-profile fraud case occupied most of her time, with long days in court and evenings spent reviewing evidence. It was nearly 3 months after the verdict when Lisa visited the Pine Ridge Park again. She had driven herself there on a whim after work, wanting to see the changes that had been made. Her cane was still in the car, but she found she didn't need it for a short walk. The park entrance looked different. New signs welcomed visitors with no mention of restrictions on mobility aids. The pathways had been widened in several areas, and gentle slopes had replaced steps where the terrain changed elevation. A family, with a stroller, easily navigated a section that had once been accessible only by stairs. Lisa walked slowly around the small lake, enjoying the early evening light on the water. Ducks paddled near the shore, hoping for breadcrumbs, and squirrels chased each other up and down the trees. It was peaceful, exactly what a community park should be. As she rounded a curve in the path, Lisa spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench overlooking the water. Patricia Wilson wore casual clothes, jeans and a sweatshirt, a far cry from her HOA uniform or court attire. She seemed lost in thought, watching the ducks with a pensive expression. Lisa hesitated, considering whether to turn around. But something made her continue walking until she reached the bench. Mind if I join you? She asked. Patricia looked up, startled. Recognition dawned immediately this time. Judge Chen, of course, please sit. Lisa settled onto the bench, leaving comfortable space between them. For a moment, neither woman spoke, both watching a mother duck leading her ducklings in a neat line across the water. The park looks different, Lisa finally said. Patricia nodded. The accessibility improvements have been completed ahead of schedule. Frank is very efficient. Frank Delgado. I read he was elected HOA president. He was, Patricia confirmed. He's good at the job. Better than I was, to be honest. Lisa looked at her, surprised by the admission. That's generous of you to say. Patricia shrugged. It's just the truth. I was so focused on property values and aesthetics that I forgot communities are about people, not just houses and rules. She gestured toward a new ramp that curved elegantly toward the lakeside gazebo. And it turns out good accessibility can be beautiful too. That ramp design won some kind of architectural award. I hadn't heard that, Lisa said. It is lovely. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The evening was cooling and the park was emptying as families headed home for dinner. I've been volunteering at the community center, Patricia said suddenly. Teaching art classes to seniors, it was part of my, well, community service isn't exactly the right term since it wasn't court-ordered. Let's call it my personal penance. Lisa raised an eyebrow, curious. Your idea? Frank's, actually. After I resigned, he called me. I expected him to be angry. He had every right to be after how the HOA had treated his accommodation requests over the years. But instead, he said he thought I had skills that could benefit the community, if they were redirected. Patricia smiled, slightly. He's a better person than I was. People can change, Lisa said. That's what I believe anyway. Patricia turned to look at her directly. I want to apologize again properly this time. What I did to you was inexcusable. Not just rude, but dangerous. You could have been seriously hurt if your husband hadn't caught you. Thank you, Lisa said simply. I appreciate that. I've had a lot of time to think about why I behaved that way, Patricia continued. I think I got so caught up in having a little bit of power that I forgot the responsibility that comes with it. She glanced at Lisa. I imagine you understand. That balance better than most being a judge. Lisa nodded. Power is only worthwhile if it's used to help others, not control them. A comfortable silence fell between them again. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the park. I should head home, Lisa said, standing up. Tom will be wondering where I am. Of course, Patricia said. It was good to see you, Judge Chen, and to see you walking without the cane. Almost fully recovered, Lisa confirmed. And please call me Lisa when we're not in court. As she walked back to her car, Lisa reflected on the unexpected turns life could take. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined having a civil conversation with Patricia Wilson in the very park where they'd had their confrontation. Yet, here they were. Not friends, certainly, but no longer adversaries. At home, Tom was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she arrived. Where'd you disappear to? He asked, leaning over for a kiss. I went to see the changes at Pine Ridge Park, she said, washing her hands at the sink. And I ran into Patricia Wilson. Tom turned from the stove, eyebrows raised. Seriously? How did that go? Surprisingly well, Lisa admitted. She's changed, or at least she's trying to. Sometimes that's all we can ask of people. Later, as they ate dinner on the patio, enjoying the last warm evening before autumn fully set in, Tom asked, Do you ever regret not being the judge on that case? You could have delivered that verdict yourself. Lisa thought about it as she sipped her water. No, she said finally. I'm glad I recused myself. Justice worked exactly as it should, not because of who was involved, but because of what was right. That's how it's supposed to work. Tom raised his glass in a small toast, to the system working. Lisa clinked her glass against his, to doing the right thing. even when no one's watching. And in that moment, watching the sunset with her husband, Lisa felt the full circle of events, from injury to confrontation, to resolution, complete itself. The world wasn't perfect, but sometimes justice found its way through the most unexpected channels, and that was something worth celebrating.